much. Everything that Dave said, well, most things that Dave said are not true, so just don't worry about the accuracy. But they're always entertaining. Okay, yes, the thing he did say correctly is that I am Eric Ries. That is correct. Details, I before E except after C. I know it's complicated, but thank you for changing that. Let's go over some ground rules real quick before we jump into this. There's really only one. That is, if you're going to tweet about this, which I encourage you please to do, the Lean Startup hashtag. I don't mean to offend our hosts if Facebook supported this use case. I'd be psyched to talk about that, but it doesn't. I read the blog Startup Lessons Learned. This is the URL. Let's get right into it. I'm here, and I hope a bunch of you are here to talk about, how we can make startups successful. But I think in order to do that, we have to start with the bad news, which is that most startups fail. And when we say most, it's not like all yours. We're not talking about 51-49 here. We're talking about outright majority, probably the super majority of startups fail and fail miserably. I have a graphical demonstration. I don't know if people remember this during the height of the Web 2.0 era. This kind of quilt of logos was created to show off all the incredible innovation that we were doing during Web 2.0. The same designer recently updated this diagram. So I think we're in a smaller room that people can actually see, but the red X's, of course, refer to companies that are no longer with us. The smaller green circles are the companies that are supposedly successful, that is the ones that had some kind of financial liquidity, and the ones unmarked are the ones that are still going. So even just by the simple standard of do they make money for their investors, we can say that most startups have failed. But I'd like us to think a little bit about a higher standard for success, at least amongst ourselves. I don't think we have too many investors in the room. Certainly in the entrepreneurs, I want you to think about, were these startups successful? Did they live up to the hopes, dreams, aspirations, and just raw talent and energy that their founders and employees invested in them? And I think by that standard, even some of the so-called successes on this page, we have to admit were failures. And if you think about it, as an industry, our track record is poor on this most important issue, which is that we invest incredible human capital into creating institution after institution, and we just accept the fact that the absolute outright supermajority of them fail, as if that's an acceptable outcome for a risky business such as ours. And the reason I want to talk to you today is relatively simple. I don't think it has to be that way. A lean startup, before it's anything else, is a vision for how I think startups could be built in such a way that they have a different mortality rate than we have gotten used to. And I think as an industry, we have an opportunity to redeem all of that energy, passion, creativity, just raw intellect that we've managed to assemble in hubs like Silicon Valley, but also around the world. So before I get any further, that's the basics. Everyone clear on that? You're all welcome to interrupt with questions as much as you want. I'll do my best to stay on track with this a little bit, and I think we have some time. Is that right for questions at the end? So we'll do some Q&A. I think we already got one right here.
Just kind of a note, I think some of the startups there, by your own standards, are not really failures. I mean, Wikipedia, Pandora, Ning are not circled, but by your standards, I imagine they would be considered successes.
Yeah, that's right. Not my diagram,
right.
It's a diagram of financial success or failure, which I think is actually getting off really easy, because there are plenty of ways to kind of make a buck without creating any lasting value. So I hope none of us here are willing to sign up for that standard, because by that standard, probably the most profitable kind of business you can run, most successful kind of business you can run is a Ponzi scheme. It's extremely profitable. One other note, I think it's important. This group, I think we all pretty much know what a startup is. If you're not sure, look to your left, look to your right. You probably just saw two. But I actually think it's important to talk about what is a startup, because we tend to get this image in our heads when we say the word startup. We think of two guys in a garage, heroically seeing the future. I guess these days maybe we would say two guys in an incubator seeing the future. But in any event, they are struggling against the odds. They can barely, afford to eat. People are ridiculing them for how crazy their idea is, because they think something's going to happen in the future that no one else believes. And then fast forward, they're on the cover of Time magazine. They have achieved every worldly success, and most of all, they're vindicated. Their idea, which people formerly thought was crazy, is now viewed as obvious. The highest compliment you can get as an entrepreneur. And the problem with that image is that it's not really very accurate. Those of you who've been through some startups know it bears almost no resemblance to reality, and it's actually highly misleading. Unfortunately, it's misleading in a very profitable way for successful companies, because PR agents and journalists and startup founders, most of all, love that idea of this kind of David versus Goliath, genius founder seeing the future, and they have a lot of incentive to tell that story and tell it often. So unfortunately, most of the stories we hear about startups are outright myths, perpetrated for good reason. Not by bad people, but because that is the way the system is set up. But if you get back to the real stories of startups that actually were successful, and you can compare them to the real stories of startups that failed, and those of you who have been through some startups will know what I'm talking about, you'll notice that the successful startups have something in common that the failed startups don't. And it isn't, as most people think, the quality of their ideas. Most startup founders, even the successful ones, have pretty appallingly bad ideas to start with. I mean, you see story after story after story where they were absolutely dead wrong about almost everything. And it's that almost everything that's really key, because usually at the heart of any vision is some kind of kernel of truth. And the successful startups are those that were able to iterate enough times, they just kind of pivot one change at a time, until they found what we call product market fit, and discovered what the kernel of truth inside their big delusion was. And the startups that failed ran out of money before they could accomplish that, very simple process. Well, at least sounds simple on paper. The premise of the lean startup is as follows. If we can shrink the time between those major iterations, then we can increase the odds of startup success. And so everything I want to talk about today is designed to help you iterate faster, get more iterations per dollar before you run out of resources. Does that make sense? All right. I like to start with story time, just easier that way. First, I want to talk about two startups that I've had the privilege of being involved with. As Dave mentioned, the first I'll only describe as startup number one. It's like the leading brand startup, because this startup is a little bit painful for me to talk about. The reason is that I came to Silicon Valley to join this company. This was in 2001, and I was really excited. This was considered a very, very hot company in the Valley. And I want you to understand that it was hot precisely because it had what was considered to be a very good plan. I was excited about this plan, as was everybody else who was invested in the company, and of course, the founders and employees. And the idea was, let's create a big company, right? A compelling long-term vision. This is not built to flip. This is, wow, where do all you people come from? Welcome, come on in. There's plenty of room, apparently. And there's tons of room being wasted over here, too. Just saying. The thing that I was excited about this company was that we wanted to make a lasting contribution. Actually invent new technology, patent pending, not just make a quick buck, like I said, but to really create something of value. And so we were thinking big. This was in the virtual world industry, where we were thinking about creating a 3D internet along the lines of what you read in science fiction. So it was about as big as it gets. And we knew the right way to go about building such a product was to hire the absolute best and the brightest, true experts in their field, and then do something really interesting. We're going to build this high-quality product. It's going to be for mainstream customers. We're not going to be distracted by these early adopter niche people, right? We don't want to be just another video game. We're trying to create the 3D internet here. So we were trying to become the next AOL, which kind of dates us a little bit, because that was still cool in those days. But we were serious about trying to create something big. And so we took all those really smart people, and we disappeared them, because we built this product in stealth. We didn't talk to our families about what we were building, no press, no anybody. It was a secret. And we would start, filing patents. Patents would kind of come out of this mysterious black hole, where we take in all these really talented people, university professors and PhDs in their field, and we just kind of taken them off the map. No one knew what they were doing. And we started to create that elusive quality called buzz, which I know we all understand to be extremely important for a startup. Now, the thing about the stealth strategy is that it was a strategy. We did this for a reason, and it wasn't just to feed our egos, although it was fun to be working at a super secret thing that nobody knew what it was. It served a very specific purpose, and the purpose was we wanted to have an optimal launch at the end of building this product. So we would build the product in stealth, we'd generate all this buzz, bloggers, journalists, everybody would be speculating about what it was, and then when it was time to bring the product to market, we would be able to get coverage in every kind of publication under the sun. And the reason we wanted that coverage was, again, not just for vanity, but because we wanted to reach mainstream customers. Remember, we're trying to build the next AOL here, so we need to reach customers who are not reading just the tech press. We got to get people where they actually pay attention, which is in mainstream publications, on TV, and on the mainstream blogs. And that was our strategy. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Anyone been through a stealth R&D Big Bang launch? Good. Well, it's time. It's not too late for the rest of you. We did something I call achieving failure with this company, and I call it that because we did not fail to execute the good plan. I got to emphasize that. Okay, we did hire the best and the brightest. We did build world-class technology. We did build a high-quality product for mainstream customers, and let me tell you, we had the launch from God. Okay, we were in the Wall Street Journal, we were in the New York Times, we had all the right bloggers and tech journalists saying this is in fact the future of the internet. There was just one small problem with the launch, which is that we didn't actually sign up any customers. Company failed, we spent about $40 million of our investors' money, set it on fire, sad to say, about 5 years of our lives that we all wish that we could have back. But again, not because we didn't execute the plan. The plan was faithfully and diligently executed, if I do say so myself. I think the company failed because it was crippled by what I call shadow beliefs. These are beliefs that were commonly shared by everybody in the company, and yet were never written down or spoken aloud ever on pain of death. If you could find the business plan for this company, you could scan every page and you will not find these shadow beliefs. And if you had, NSA level transcripts of every conversation and email that we had in this company, and you inspected them line for line for these shadow beliefs, you would never find them spoken out loud. And yet, I think if you look at the good plan that we had, and of course, of so many other Valley companies, you will find these beliefs operating, even though they're not spoken. There are 3 shadow beliefs I want to talk to you about today, because I think they're important for understanding the context of what I want to say later. The first one is that we know what customers want, which I think is obvious when you think about what is entrepreneurship. That is, why do we invest time, energy, and money into creating a new company? It's because obviously we think we know some cool new thing that customers want, or I should say, that customers will want. Because of course customers don't know what they want today, but once they see this amazing new gizmo that we create, then they will know that they do want our product. So we speak in definite terms about the future, which is already a little bit iffy. The reason we can get away with that, and in fact the reason why that's critical to entrepreneurship, is that good startup founders have what we call the reality distortion field. It's like their superpower. And they can take people in their vicinity, investors, other employees, other founders, and they can get them to believe, as if it was true, things which are literally not true. Which is very useful. And in fact, I don't want you to come away with this idea that the reality distortion field is bad. The good entrepreneurs have it and the bad entrepreneurs have it. And in fact, a third group of people that I haven't mentioned yet also have the power of the reality distortion field, and that's crazy people. And I'm sad to say that people who are suffering from a delusion are just as persuasive and just as charismatic and oftentimes more powerful than people who are in the throes of a vision. So you might ask the question, well, what's the difference between a vision and a delusion? And I think most startups don't get even past that question. They're like, well, I don't want to think about that, because that's really scary, right? To think that we might invest years of our lives on a delusion, that's too terrifying, and it's easier to just say, let's not talk about it, and let's just execute the plan instead, which is more comforting, but unfortunately not more profitable. The thing about the difference between a vision and a delusion is that a vision is grounded in reality and a delusion isn't. And so one of the premises of a lean startup is that even if you're within a reality distortion field, and even if everybody in your vicinity really believes in what you're doing, you can still just check with reality to be like, are we onto something? Or are we really under some kind of hallucinogenic substance? And I think that most startups they don't even bother with that basic step. Second shadow belief is that we can accurately predict the future, which is something that if you did say it out loud, you would in fact be considered a crazy person. Yet we all operate as if this was true. So for example, startups have a business plan, got it in order to raise money. Business plan is required to have a spreadsheet in the back. Anyone have one of those spreadsheets? Let me guess, in year 5 you have $100 million in revenue? Anybody?
Year 3 we're overachievers.
Oh yeah, year 3, right. And some critically soon year, not too distant that investors wouldn't be interested, but not too soon as it seem implausible, we'll have $100 million in revenue, right? Listen, I'm all for us using spreadsheets for the purposes of fundraising. I think that's a time-honored entrepreneurial technique. The problem is then when we start to believe the things that are in the spreadsheet that we created by simply thinking them up. So for example, in startup number 1, I think if I remember correctly, the spreadsheet said in year 1, this company would have 1 million simultaneous users. Something like that, using the product. And so everyone in the company was required to staff up in anticipation of this incredible wave. So, imagine I'm the head of customer service for this company. Just think about my thought process. Okay, we're going to launch, we're going to have this huge big bang launch, we come out of stealth, and we're going to have this huge influx of customers ramping very quickly up to 1 million simultaneous users. What if we don't have good customer service? Like, what if my department is not staffed up to meet that need? The company could have a very high profile failure that could be traced back to me personally, and guess who gets fired? Right? But also, guess who gets blamed for the failure of our collective enterprise? It could be me as the head of customer service. So, of course, in anticipation of the rush, I got to be staffed up and ready. I don't mean to pick on customer service, because now play out that same logic across every single department. In operations, we better make sure we have a big enough cluster to handle the load. In sales, in marketing, and in fact, in engineering. My background is in engineering. I was an engineer at this company. We were building this really cool technology, and we knew it needed to have a highly scalable architecture, right? Because otherwise, when we get the huge influx of customers, we won't be able to partition the load correctly. And I know we have some engineers in the room, so you'll nod along with me when you say, well, in order to get a highly scalable, partitionable architecture, you have to have a pretty good model for what customer behavior is going to be, right? And we all know if that model is just a few degrees off, our highly scalable architecture will, be neither. And so we'll get the worst of both worlds. And in fact, that's what happened at startup number 1. We had an architecture that was as expensive and heavyweight and hard to change as if it was highly scalable. And it only supported, 10,000 simultaneous users, not 1 million. So we had lost, across all departments, that quality of agility, the ability to respond to events rapidly, with which we had bought a high burn rate. So it wasn't a very good deal. This company had 200 employees before customers saw the product. And then shadow belief number 3, my personal favorite, the one that makes achieving a failure possible. That is that advancing the plan is progress. So I know we have entrepreneurs in the room, so I know you guys will know what I'm talking about when I say entrepreneurs are exceptionally skilled at keeping people busy. Okay, we have that talent inside the reality distortion field. We wake up every morning, we got to be selling. We got to sell investors that their money was well spent. We got to sell partners that they should do business with us. We have to sell our employees that they should be giving 110%, have no life, and stay in the office. We have to sell customers, if we're so lucky to have any, that they should really be using our product. And in general, we're trying to keep people busy, motivated, invested in the success of our startup. But I now have a consulting practice, so I get to work with a lot of startup founders, and I certainly will admit to this, as I think most will when they're being really honest. Say, all right, you spent all day, you expended energy, you kept people busy. You get home at night, you go to sleep, and you ask yourself, all right, I know I kept people busy, but did we make any progress today? Did our company achieve any goals other than advancing the plan? I think most startup founders, if they're being honest, will admit that the best they can muster is a maybe. I hope so. I think so. We did advance the plan. We did hit milestones. But you think about it, in an early stage company, what is progress? Is how can we tell the difference between expending energy and making progress? I think we don't know. We don't have, at least in my experience, a very comprehensive theory for answering that question, and so we fall back on the easy stuff to track, like milestones, like schedules, like deliverables, the kind of thing we would measure if we were in an existing market and we were the general manager of a big company with an established product. And unfortunately, those best practices, which are very important in general management, are absolutely positively fatal when transplanted into that soil of extreme uncertainty that startups live with. Does that make sense? All right, good. So let me just go back to the good plan real quick. And I sometimes speak to audiences where people say, yeah, the shadow beliefs are obvious. Duh. Nobody believes that stuff. Literally, you would have to be a crazy person to agree to those 3 shadow beliefs. And so if there's anyone who's having that thought in the audience, just ask you as an exercise, to be done later or at your convenience, think about the good plan that we put together at startup number 1 and is put together so many startups, especially in Silicon Valley, and ask yourself, if you really didn't believe any of those 3 shadow beliefs, would you really put together a plan like this? I think the answer is no. And I got the chance to start again and basically try to put some of those ideas into practice. Because you can understand the magnitude of the failure of startup number 1 was pretty big. It was public, it was expensive, and it was embarrassing. And some of my co-founders and I left that company to found a new company where we were really, really, really determined not to repeat that failure. Startup number 2 I'm allowed to talk about is InView. I bring some pictures. These are screenshots from InView. It's a 3D avatar instant messaging and social networking product. User-generated content, People buy using a micropayment currency, clothes for their avatar, and that clothes is created by other people who can make a living, in some cases, making many hundreds of thousands of dollars selling clothes on Infuse. Very exciting. I was just in Japan, thanks to Dave, to give this talk, and so I have some Japanese screenshots. Infuse is now a worldwide phenomenon. It's been quite successful, and I'm very proud of it. But I want to turn the clock back to 2004. This is when we started Infuse. And just put yourself in our shoes. We just come off this really crushing failure. Like I said, very public, very embarrassing. And I think it was the magnitude of our failure that gave us the psychological permission necessary to say, what would it be like if we just tried to make different mistakes this time? Instead of doing the things that everyone advises us to do and are the consensus of our peers, what if we actually tried to really take a deep look at each of the assumptions that we had about how a company is supposed to be built, and just, like I said, for God's sakes, let's just make new mistakes. If we're going to fail again, if it's going to be public and embarrassing, let's at least fail while doing stuff that we actually believe in versus stuff that we've heard is a good idea, but we're not really sure why. And so we built a new plan. Some of the things on this plan were considered in 2004 controversial, and I think some of them still are, so let me try a few on. The first is we shipped that product in 6 months. And I'm not kidding around here. I'm talking about from the day we incorporated the company to the day we were in full public beta. So anybody who wanted to come to our site and register for it, there were no special codes. This was not friends and family. All I'm talking about full public beta was 180 days and not a day more. And if there are any engineers in the audience, I can always tell because you can see the wheels turning as they start to do the math. Okay, you said 3D avatars and virtual currency, social networking, instant messaging. Obviously, there's some downloadable client with 3D rendering. And they're like, okay, I got the scope. And you said you fixed the time. It's going to be 6 months, and I will assure you we had no money. So it's not like we hired a gigantic engineering staff to do it. So that doesn't add up. Something had to give. And I want to be really frank and clear that we built a very crappy product. Okay? This product sucked, and I'm not embarrassed to say so now. At the time, it was really painful. This product would be as likely to crash your computer as it would be to give you a delightful 3D avatar social life. And we were really worried. Look, there are a lot of reasons not to do this, not the least of which is we were afraid, God, people are going to think the Infuse brand sucks. It's going to stand for low quality. And people like a New York Times journalist who's written about our previous failure could come use our product and they could write a new article. Morons from put out crappy product because they don't know any better. That could have been the headline in some article somewhere, or at least on some blog. And the worst was, as an engineer, I was worried about my professional reputation. I had mentors who told me, listen, you are committing career suicide because people are going to think you don't know the difference between a high-quality software and low-quality software because you're putting this thing out there under your own name. So we were afraid. But we decided we would do it anyway, and we needn't have worried, because of course nobody used the product. So how could they have found out that it was really crappy? See, those of you who have actually done some online marketing will know, you just put a product out onto the interwebs, and then what? Right? Then you have to actually get people to go to that website, and get them to download your product, and God forbid, try it to discover that it would crash their computer. It's actually not as easy as it sounds. So the idea that you build it and they will come, I don't know if that idea was ever true, but it's certainly not true anymore. So we put this product out, and we got almost no customers. So on the one hand, that was embarrassing, but on the other hand, it was kind of a relief. Well, except for the second thing in the plan, which is that we were charging money for that product. So Infuse has been a paid service from day one. It's a premium business, and I won't go into the complexities of the business model. So when I said that almost nobody used it, that's actually not strictly true. We did get a few people who were willing to use even our super crappy product. And in fact, those people were willing to pay for it, even though it barely worked at all. Of course, those are what we call visionary customers, the true early adopters, the people who are buying, not because they like what the product is today, but because they share your vision of what the product will be, and they want to be in on it early. And founders don't always like to hear this, but it's true. In a lot of cases, visionary customers are more visionary, and they're certainly smarter than the founders of the companies that serve them, because they live with the problem that your product is, purports to solve every day. And they understand it, certainly at the beginning, way better than you do. Certainly they understood it better than we did. So these customers, we have been in dialogue with these customers from day one, selling them a product that started out as not very good, but over time evolved to really meet their needs. And like I said, I got the laugh, so I know you guys certainly agree. Charging for this product was a bad idea, right? Not just the usual reasons why, we should never charge for bad bread. Sorry, a bad product that's going to ruin your brand equity and your professional reputation. All those reasons I talked about already. But there's an even worse reason at InView. I don't know if anybody caught it. I mentioned that InView is supposed to be an instant messaging product. So we're charging money for a communications product, a product that benefits from network effects, so-called Metcalfe's law. The value of a network, increases exponentially with the square the number of participants, people nodding along. So you're not supposed to charge for a communication product because that prevents you from getting to critical mass. The idea is first you get to critical mass, then it explodes out from there, then you find some way to monetize it on the back end. That's the classic theory. And so we had plenty of people who say, listen, despite all the other things you've said, that's the biggest risk you're undertaking in charging for this product so early. You're going to retard the network effects. And we were worried about that. But in 2004, we were worried about something else even more. We thought the most risky assumption that underlied our business plan was that real people would pay real money to buy virtual clothes for their virtual avatar. See, in 2004, when I would say things like this, people would laugh. That was a punchline, and just like we charge money for a low-quality product, and now it's considered fashionable, I know, to say, well, of course, everybody knows that people will pay money for, like, God knows what virtual crap on the internet. So, it's not funny anymore. But in 2004, when we were raising money for this product, when we went through our various rounds of fundraising in 2004 and 2005, people really thought that was ridiculous. We were laughed at plenty of investors, offices. And to be fair, we were a little bit concerned ourselves. We said, of all the things that we are assuming are going to happen in the future, according to our business plan, this is the riskiest one. So why not test it first? Like the very first assumption we want to test is, does this basic business make sense? Is this an actual business that we're building, or is it just a hobby? We didn't want to do another hobby, and we didn't want to be in another unintentional not-for-profit. We actually wanted to build a business of lasting value. And I think there's a real difference between aspiring to a business of lasting value and hoping for the best, and actually deciding that you are going to create a business of lasting value, and therefore are willing to do whatever it takes to make it happen. That was the mentality we were trying to create for ourselves back then. There were other elements of the plan. One is that we ship software multiple times a day. InView doesn't talk a lot about its metrics publicly, but I know they've said in 2008 it's about an average of 50 times a day. And this is why I like to look and see who the engineers in the audience are, because they're shaking their heads. And I got a few here, because that's a very bad idea. This is to be clear, at InView, you check in code to the main source code repository, to the trunk, there's no branching, and then 20 minutes later it's running in production. Sometimes it'll be 25 minutes, sometimes 15 minutes, on average, 20 minutes. And if you think about all the things that can go wrong, you'll realize why engineers don't want to do that. First of all, some random dude could take the site down. That doesn't sound like a very good idea. Certainly he could regress an old bug. My favorite, talking about the difference between a company and a hobby, he could remove the checkout button from your e-commerce part of your website. So before you had a profitable business, now like I said, you have a hobby again. So those are all possibilities, and those are all fears that might tell you, boy, don't do that. But as we'll talk about at the end of the presentation, if there's time, we practice a discipline called continuous deployment that makes doing this possible without having those problems. They're actually easy to mitigate. And by reducing the batch size of work, we're able to get much faster feedback about what we're doing. Since a lot of features in most products take longer to argue about and prioritize than they do to build. So instead of arguing and prioritizing, let's just build it, see what happens, and then measure the result, and then learn something from it. By doing that in a disciplined way, we can accelerate the speed of everything that we do in the company. And last, no PR, no launch. So even though we had made the mistake of stealth in the first company, I would like to say stealth is a customer-free zone. That's why it's so fun. Those pesky customers bothering you with their opinions. And we didn't want to repeat that mistake again. But we also didn't want to get distracted by trying to talk to journalists and talking to investors and getting advice from all kinds of people who are emphatically not our customers. So we didn't talk to any of those people. We just spent time focused on what is our product, who is the customer. Turned out okay. I can't say a lot about InView publicly because the data has not been released. 2007 revenues of about $10 million and more since then. It's still a going concern. It's actually down the street in Palo Alto. I didn't see any InView people in the room. Hopefully nobody here to contradict what I'm saying. So I left InView last summer, and so I've had some time. I started writing the blog, started lessons learned, started doing some consulting. I started doing some work as a venture advisor to the unnamed capital company that Dave mentioned. Dave so kindly mentioned. And I started to develop this concept called the lean startup. And what I thought was there must be a way to systematize some of the things that I have learned and see work across different startup companies. Some of the things I had a chance to put in practice at InView, and some were still just theories that I was hoping the companies I worked with would get the test. And so over the last year, I have been refining this methodology. There are three kind of major trends that allow lean startups to go faster. I'll just put these up on the screen so people are aware. First is the commodity technology stack, the idea of leveraged product development. Second is something called customer development, a parallel methodology to product development. It lets you figure out what customers want before you build it, aka before it's too late. And of course, agile product development, but not the agile that people are familiar to, which has its roots in big companies. Agile as tuned for the startup condition. So when you put up a slide with three things in it, it's like a law of nature that you're going to talk about the three things in turn. So commodity technology stack, I don't think this is something in this audience I have to say much about. Suffice to say that the time it takes to bring a new product prototype to market has been collapsing and falling. So although I was really proud in 2004 having built that initial product of InView in 6 months, if a company today said they were going to spend 6 months to put their first product out, I would laugh in their face. Because like in the last 5 years, this has gotten easier, easier, easier. Every month, every day, it's getting cheaper and easier. And not just cheaper, faster. I think that's a really important distinction to think about. Whenever I talk about customer development, I have to plug this book. This is The 4 Steps to the Epiphany, which is written by an InView investor and one of my personal mentors named Steve Blank. I won't say any more except to say, go out and buy this book and read it and put it under your pillow and hope to learn from osmosis as much as you can. It's really good. I think it's one of the best books about entrepreneurship that exists. And then let me revisit this question of product development. I want to go back to the tale of two startups, which kind of started out as my idiosyncratic experience in these two companies, and instead talk about them schematically as metaphors for what I think has been going on in our whole industry, and give you a sense from kind of the diagram view what I think a lean startup looks like. And then after we've done with the theory, I promise we will dive into some specifics for as long as you guys are willing to sit and ask about them. Does that make sense? All right. Oh, and I don't think I have to explain this here, but in some audiences we have non-startups or non-software people in the room, and so they wonder, well, is this applicable to me? And I just say the answer is yes. If there's any such people who are confused, please come see me afterwards. But I think we're pretty much software entrepreneurs, more or less, in the room today. So let's start with the waterfall methodology. Dave's heard me say this a million times, but it is traditional in a talk about development methodologies to beat up on waterfall first. It's like a tradition amongst process and engineering types, so here we go. This is the waterfall development methodology in all its glory. This is what makes achieving a failure possible in the first place. Anyone here ever collected requirements for a product? Anyone ever written a specification for a product? All right, we've all designed products, we've built products, they go through a verification phase, and then eventually they wind up in maintenance. For the people who said they wrote a specification for the product, anyone have the final product actually resemble the specification at the end? One. Anybody else?
Okay, so
2, 3. Oh, we got 3 in the room. That's the typical ratio if you look who are raising their hands. And that's too bad because the waterfall methodology, for all it's fun to pick on, is actually extremely well adapted to a specific context. It just happens to be not a context that any of us have the privilege of living in. When we have a known problem and a known solution, you can use waterfall because you can pretty accurately model what's going to happen in the future using statistical control processes or just really good planning. When we know what we're trying to do and we know how we're going to do it, then we can actually write specifications that make some amount of sense and have some possibility of actually happening. Having reality resemble what we wrote is at least a remote possibility. And so the unit of progress in waterfall is that we advance to the next stage. So, I started number 1 where we practiced waterfall. When we completed a specification document and got all the stakeholders to buy in and sign off, we celebrated as if we accomplished something. Because it felt like, wow, we really did a lot of work, and now, wow, we've really done something material. And we celebrated again when that same product was designed, and we celebrated again when that same product was delivered to QA for verification. And we celebrated again when QA certified it as ready to be released, even though we hadn't actually released it to anybody. Because it felt like progress. We were advancing the plan. We were making it from one stage to the next. So those of us who build software for a living in particular don't live in that known problem, known solution world at all. If you look at the academic research on software projects in general, something like 6 out of 10 fail outright, which means that even like in a big IT department where they're building a product that's very, very, very well understood, still the lucky ones are the projects that come in way late and way over budget. And in startups, that problem is probably 10 times worse. So there's this thing called agile product development. Who's actually practiced some kind of agile software development in their companies? Okay, basically looks like about half. Agile is a hot buzzword. It's been around for about 10 years now. And the idea here is that if we build products iteratively, so that we're not just waiting for one big bang release at the end, but we kind of get to see progress as we go, we can increase the odds of creating a successful software project. And I think that's really true. And I'm a big fan of what the Agile movement has done for product development in general, even beyond software. But I think it's really important to understand that Agile comes out of big companies, and it's for a good reason. The canonical Agile project, in fact, from which the origins of extreme programming were born, was like, big company needs a new payroll system. And we're building a new payroll system, maybe. Why are we doing that? Because the old payroll system runs on mainframes, and we're going to import it to commodity hardware. That's like your classic big company IT project that under Waterfall has that 6 out of 10 mortality rate. Under Agile, we can do a lot better. So for example, we'll collapse the time it takes for engineers on the product to get feedback. We'll take a customer, like some internal customer from the accounting department who runs payroll, and we'll sit them physically next to the engineers who are building the system, so that if they have a question about how the software should work, or what does this thing mean, or like, seriously, what the hell is payroll, and how does it work? Right? Which a lot of engineers aren't too clear on those kinds of concepts. Instead of having to give a request for information to their manager, who takes it to somebody else's manager in some department, and maybe 3 months later commissions a customer research study, they can turn their chair to the left, say, excuse me, in-house customer, can you answer this question for me and tell me what the heck it is I'm doing, or how this screen should look, or get instantaneous feedback that is authoritative. And it's that idea of the authoritative answer to these kind of customer questions that's really important, and it makes a lot of the Agile practices work. So I call that the known problem, but the unknown solution. The idea here is that if we're building payroll, it's kind of stupid to ask, what problem are we trying to solve? It's obvious. Every company makes payroll, or it would go out of business in the next 2 weeks. So there's already some mechanism for doing payroll, and our goal in building a new payroll system is primarily to replicate that same infrastructure, but under Agile, we'll do it incrementally, rather than, like I said, in a big bang release at the end. The cool thing about Agile is it changes the unit of progress to a line of working code. So we realize that everything that we do, if it doesn't directly or indirectly lead to working code, it's waste. So if we write a specification document that nobody reads, waste. Documentation that nobody reads, waste. My favorite, we build code that we might need in the future, but then we don't actually wind up needing it, waste. Buggy code, of course, is waste, and basically almost all meetings wind up being waste. So Agile allows us to eliminate a lot of that garbage. But unfortunately, as startups, we don't live in this world either. We live in the world of the unknown problem and the unknown solution. So first off, if we don't even know who the customer for our product is, who are we going to sit with the engineers? Damn. And that's true for a lot of Agile and Waterfall practices. When we get into the unknown world of startups, they simply don't work. So this is a diagram. This is what kind of schematically a lean startup looks like. Here we have an iterative process of customer development happening at the top, and an iterative process of Agile product management at the bottom, integrated into a company-wide feedback loop. Now, this may not make a lot of sense to you now, but I promise it will one day in the future. Let me just emphasize one thing, just for starters. We changed the unit of progress, again, from a line of working code to what I call validated learning about customers. And this is really frustrating. Okay, as an engineer, this is not my favorite thing about the lean startup. To learn this lesson took a lot of mistakes on my part, and I want to tell you about one of them. I don't like talking about this, but it's important. It involves me being wrong and my co-founders being right, which is my least favorite kind of thing to talk about. We built that instant messaging product, I mentioned it at NIMBY. We were very concerned with network effects, and we actually had further strategic brilliance beyond just understanding the network effects. We understood that instant messaging has an inherently high barrier to entry because there are high switching costs for customers to leave one instant messaging and go to the client and go to the next. They have to bring their friends with them. And so it's basically impossible to bring a new IM network to market, which is why it happens so rarely. And so our ingenious solution to that problem is that we were going to build an instant messaging add-on product that would interoperate with all of the existing IM clients and allow you to transform your boring 2D instant messaging into magical 3D instant messaging. And at the whiteboard, that strategy looks really good, and when I speak like in business schools, I usually get a lot of nods, like, boy, those guys are smart. That's a good strategy. And listen, I thought we were pretty smart too. That's why we came up with it. And the only problem with that strategy, there's something incoherent about it. My reasoning is completely sound. It just happens to be wrong, because none of the things I just said are true. The network effects are overblown, the switching costs are not there, and there's no barrier to entry. It's actually relatively easy to bring a new kind of instant messaging to market. I don't even want to talk about that. The reasons why that strategy makes no sense. If you're in the middle of exploring that strategy right now and you want to talk about it afterwards, I'm happy to. What I want you to do instead of thinking about that is think about me and how I felt. See, we've been working for 6 months, I mentioned. I personally wrote the code to do IAM interoperability across, I don't know how many IAM clients, more than I care to count. I don't know how many lines of code that was, several tens of thousands probably. And it turned out to have all been waste. Even though I have been a religious practitioner of agile software development. So I'm like, all right, we have unit tests and the code is well factored, has a good architecture, and we pair program and all that stuff that will drive the waste out of our development process. And that was all well and good except for the fact that the biggest source of waste, especially in a startup, is building something that nobody wants, which is not a technical problem and therefore cannot have a technical solution. I had to be dragged kicking and screaming by my co-founders to the realization that this whole thing had been a waste of time, and that I would have contributed just as much to our product by spending the last 6 months on vacation as if I had devoted 24/7 writing this IAM interoperability software, which turned out to be just a horrendously bad idea. Incidentally, one of those ideas that customers never ask for, but investors always do. So, of course, we wound up building it twice. Bad idea the second time, too. That was really hard for me. I was not a happy camper, and I was like in despair about the possibility of really having waste-free product development until I realized that it wasn't total waste. That we had really learned a lot about who our customers were and would be from that exercise. It's just the code itself was not in progress. And so I go back to that thing I said at the beginning, that most entrepreneurs do not know the difference between expending energy and making progress. I'd like to propose this as one possible answer to that conundrum. That if you are generating validated learning about customers, then you are making progress. I put dollar signs in parentheses here because, of course, my favorite form of validation is you're actually getting people to give you money. That one's just hard to delude yourself about. But there are other forms of validation, too. The crazy thing about this definition, if you think about it, is that it locates progress in a startup firmly inside the heads of the people who work there, and not in any external artifact. It's not the code that you write. It's not the documents you write. It's not your brilliant business plan. Here's the wacky part. It's not even the revenue that you collect to do the validation. It's just what have you learned about how to build this idea into a business. And so I can show that process schematically in a simplified form. This is, as you can see from the poster, this is the fundamental feedback loop that powers all startups. And since I'm from software, I like to write these from the point of view of software companies. A software company is at its heart a gigantic catalyst that turns ideas into code. It's important to understand that everything else is a side effect. Some of those side effects are necessary, others, like I said, are waste. If we're an advanced company, we might collect data about what happens when customers interact with that code. And then if we're really advanced, we might try to learn something. So far I haven't said anything too interesting, but now consider this. My belief is that the proper heuristic to use when evaluating any practice whatsoever for a startup is to ask yourself, does it minimize the total time to this feedback loop, or is it just sub-optimized by making one of the 3 stages slightly easier? Most of the so-called best practices that get imported into startups and then kill them happen because they proceed by nice, rational arguments like the one I'm about to give you. Consider an engineer who says, you know what? All this measurement and data warehousing code is really slowing me down. Wouldn't it be faster, we could write our product faster, better, cheaper, if we just removed all that crap? And the problem with that argument is that it's true. Yes, you can code faster if you don't measure anything. In fact, measurement and metrics is a huge amount of overhead for any company to maintain, especially from the engineer's point of view. We generate all these reports that nobody reads. What's the point of that? That is a true argument. There's nothing to say that's incorrect about that. You will, in fact, code faster if you do that. The problem is that you won't be executing this feedback loop anymore. And the same with what I call the data warehousing fallacy, which is that if measuring one thing is good, measuring more things is better. And just rinse, wash, repeat until we're measuring 10,000 things, which is great if you're the data warehousing department, but it's not so great if you're actually trying to learn something, because nobody can learn from 10,000 graphs. And then my personal favorite, the MBA fallacy. My wife is an MBA. I like MBAs a lot. It's not personal. Any MBAs in the audience? Oh, wow, more than I expected. Sorry, guys, in advance. And it's an I don't have an MBA, but I've been guilty of this fallacy plenty of times, which is that the fastest way to iterate your business or business plan is to do it at the whiteboard. Just come in the morning, write your strategy up on the diagram, and then iterate. Realize, oh, we could move this around here, we get this other partner in here, and then we get better time there, and move the boxes and arrows around, go home, oof, I'm exhausted, that was a really solid day's work. The next morning in the shower, oh, wait a minute, a strategic brilliance. Run into the office, go to the whiteboard, and change it around again, and just do that indefinitely. That when I talked about the brilliant network effects and the switching costs, that whole strategy was to, my co-founders and I spent plenty of time at the whiteboard iterating. So we thought we were doing a good thing, right? Being very iterative, we're really learning, except we're not learning anything, there's no facts involved. And the problem with the MBA fallacy is you're not actually doing anything. You're just thinking about doing something, talking about doing something, which unfortunately is not as good. One thing I didn't mention, that I probably should, let me go back to this diagram real quick. Just in order to do either of these feedback loops, this is really the same thing printed two different ways, but it's easier to see on this diagram. Most of what we do that involves departments impedes our ability to do this kind of feedback. And so I call it the startup dollhouse fallacy. A startup is just a shrunken down big company. And so, because big companies have departments and a startup is a company, therefore startup should have departments, which I think is just backwards reasoning. Departments get us thinking locally about what makes sense for us and our function, rather than globally about what accelerates the progress of our company. So just to make one concrete recommendation, if you're in a startup today or thinking about creating one, don't have any departments. Instead, have a problem team and a solution team, both of which are cross-functional. So the problem team kind of takes over what we used to call marketing, sales, business development, but it's cross-functional, so it does have some engineers on it. And the solution team takes over what we used to call engineering, ops, and QA, but it also has some business people on it. Both teams operate their own feedback loop independently, but then most importantly, share with each other in real time insights about what they're learning. So, build, measure, learn. That's the fundamental loop. So, I want to get into some specific practices, but I want to pause here just for a second to see other questions, other kind of theory questions that people are dying to ask, or it's getting a little hot in here, people need a break. So, yeah.
One question. So, you put a lot of emphasis on measuring metrics. What about just sitting down with the user and getting real-time feedback, sitting there watching them use it, sort of not so quantitative, more qualitative?
Yes, actually, really thank you for asking that. I happen to really be a fan of the quantitative metrics approach for startups, and I emphasize that because most startups don't do enough of it. But actually, when I say measure here and I use the word data, I don't mean quantitative. That's actually not what I mean. So, in fact, when you're in the very early stages of a startup, it's actually more important to get that qualitative feedback. I'm surprised at the number of startups who are building products but have never spoken to a single potential customer. Or when I ask them, well, who have you talked to? They'll be like, well, I talked to my wife's cousin, and he likes the product. Or, I have a friend of my, my girlfriend who thinks it's great. So I don't know why it always is the spouse's friend who is the validation that the product is a good idea. I do that all the time. But that's not good enough. So there's a lot that we can do beyond just split testing and kind of standard analytics that can give us information about what customers want. In particular, creating a customer advisory board, I think, is just a no-brainer. Doing in-person usability tests. And I think the hardest one of all, which is just sitting down face-to-face with a potential customer and not talking about your product. That's actually really hard, especially for people who are on that, what I call the problem team. What they need to understand first is, what's the need that my product speaks to for customers? And entrepreneurs are very bad at having that conversation, because of course everything they see in life, they see, ooh, need for my product, need for my product, need for my product, just like overwhelming evidence everywhere they turn. And so when they talk to customers, they tend to be selling, not listening. So this requires a fair bit of listening, probably more than most entrepreneurs are comfortable with. And in fact, if this process doesn't make you uncomfortable while doing it, you're definitely not doing it right. Other questions, Siri? Yeah, in the back.
Now, you mentioned that the unit of progress should be, that what you learn about a customer. Can you give me some examples of that, even in your, in your experience?
Yeah. So let me go back to that Imbue's instant messaging add-on example, because that one just giving you the context, so you'll be able to understand the learning that we had. The specific problem with that idea was that customers did not want to invite their friends to a product they had not tried themselves. And if people want on the blog, there's a whole video where I kind of walk through exactly what that focus group with customers looked like. It was pretty ugly. was just a total deal breaker to do this add-on concept. So basically be IMing with someone and then boom, invite them into the 3D experience. What they wanted instead was to try Imbue with another customer who was interested in 3D avatars first, before they would invite their friends. So that was kind of the specific tactical thing that we learned, that we kind of gotten it backwards. We thought, use it with your friends, that will make it more viral. But in fact, what was better is to use it with a stranger first to see if you like it and then decide to invite your friends. So that was an example of the solution team banging their heads against a hypothesis that turned out to be wrong, that we kind of got from the problem team. And so that's actually usually how you find out that you're on the wrong track, is the solution team is busy executing the hell out of the current plan, and you're not making any progress. You can just kind of feel the wheels spinning to not make progress. So that was, that allowed us to iterate and change the product features. But if I take the camera lens back and say, what did we learn about the business from that exercise? And I didn't understand this until years later. It turns out that for Imbue, the fundamental value for customers was not hanging out online with your existing friends, which is what Facebook is effectively for. Instead, it was all about making new friends. And that might sound like a relatively subtle difference. After all, both are socializing online. What's the big deal? Turns out that from a business model point of view, what you have to do to make a making new friends type business work is radically different than a hangout with your existing friends business. We're quite different. We would not have learned that if we hadn't really come out with that first product swinging and then had it crash and burn in our face. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So
to help us improve the defense mechanisms that would prevent that class of downtime incidents from happening again. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. For the mechanism how to do that, we'll talk about 5 whys in a sec. Yeah?
On these steps you have in your immune system, by most of them you have tool examples in parentheses, but not under incremental deploy.
Yeah, if someone wants to write that tool, it'd be awesome. Doesn't exist as far as I know.
Okay.
The good news is it's not
very hard to build. So that's just complicated build scripts then, basically.
Yeah, that's right. I don't want people to think cluster immune system means it's like some kind of fancy cybernetic organism that manages this process for us. These are actually very, very simple scripts that do something very well defined. It has to be that way because they're running constantly, and so if they're convoluted, there's no way to improve them and kind of figure out what went wrong when something does go wrong. So each individual piece is quite simple, and just when it fails, we'll try to make it a little bit more robust, a little bit more robust. Certainly it means that everything winds up being pretty much automated. You can't do this if you're still working with like release checklists, like, oh, make sure to push this magic button somewhere, else the release is not official for some reason, or like this half of the system thinks it's not a release and this half doesn't. So you wind up catching all those problems, but rather than doing it through top-down analysis, say, what are all the things that might go wrong? Now let's prevent all of those. We use the actual problems that we have to teach us what the system needs in terms of prevention. And like I said, there's tons of tools to be written in this whole pipeline. If anyone's interested, see me after. Here we go. I want to talk quickly about rapid split testing. This is something where I've really written extensively on the blog, and so I don't want to go into a lot of detail. I'm just going to mention it. A lot of people do some kind of split testing. Everyone knows what A/B testing is, right? 50% of customers see one version of the product, 50% see a different version, and we see how their behavior changes between versions. Most tools that allow you to do split testing are too complicated, so like people have to give a lot of thought and energy and prioritization to decide should we do a split test or not. And my goal for you is to make it so that in your company, split testing is so easy, there's literally no excuse not to do it. So, I mean, at Imbue, it would be considered silly. You'd be laughed out of the room if you're like, let's make a change to the product and not measure what happens. You're like, why wouldn't you want to know what happens? Like, oh, I'm not interested if customer behavior changes, I just think this change looks better. That's my favorite. If you don't do split testing, products tend to get prettier over time. But if you do split testing, they tend to get more effective over time. I think that's a better deal. So I think split test can't be more than one line of code for the engineers in the room. Like I said, full spec for how to write this is on the blog. Good news, it's incredibly simple. If you make your split test system even remotely complicated, nobody can use it. So if you feel like, oh, I got to spend 2 weeks doing split testing system, you've already spent too much time on version 1. Because you're violating the 3 A's of metrics. It's got to be actionable, accessible, and auditable. Most data warehousing people do not realize how little credibility they have with the rest of their organization. The vast majority of reports are total waste because the people who get the report don't know what to do with the information you're giving them. The question back.
Yeah, my question is, I mean, every time that you do a split test, you're not duplicating all the metrics for both the versions. Oh yeah.
I don't understand the question.
Well, I mean, like, you have some metrics where you are measuring your success. When you run a split test, do you actually split also the metric in the sense you look what's happening for all the metrics to
Yes.
variation A and variation
I'll show you a screenshot in one slide. Let me get this point across first, because I've noticed these 3A's starting to show up in other contexts, which is good. I really want, this is like a general point about whether you're investing time in creating metrics or not. If they're complicated, if there's fancy derivatives involved, people can't understand them. So I tend to think your metrics, and especially split testing metrics, should be denominated in the units of people, not some other abstract concept like number of actions or percentage of actions that resulted in some other action, or the number of quanta that were affected by the number of bytes that did this. Like, those reports already are incomprehensible to 90% of people. So the reports have to be simple enough people can understand them. And then auditable is actually the most important and least understood attribute, because metrics are people too. And so when we show someone a report that says, in variation B of this split test, 100 people did this action, if they're a little bit skeptical, they might say something like, oh yeah, which 100 people? It's like, you're asking me to abandon my pet project because your random report says 100 people did X instead of Y. My easiest defense mechanism to that idea is to say the report's not valid. Those people really didn't do that. Rather than to say, I'm wrong, my pet project is a bad idea. So it's really important that your reports be able to translate the metrics into people who I then could go talk to validate whether, in fact, the metrics make any sense whatsoever. I promise to show a screenshot. This is just an example of a principle we call measure the macro, which is that even if you're doing an extremely detailed split test that's like we're changing the color of some button from red to blue, I don't think you should ever measure the click-through rate of the button. If the experiment improves the click-through rate, who cares? The only reason to do a split test in a startup is because you think it will affect top-level business metrics or customer behavior. So if that's all you care about, that's what you should measure. So to answer your question directly, I recommend you take a set of key metrics, no more than 5 to 10, and you just run a standard report that every split test is measured against. So we just see in group A, of the 1,000 people who registered, 500 of them were active 1 to 3 days later. So all of these reports, the numbers are denominated in number of people who did this activity in this period of time. And I promise all this information is on the blog if people want to know exactly how to do it. Yeah?
What about trying to have too many split tests running at the same time and wondering which one was what, which one affected it versus another?
Don't have to worry about it. Okay. In my experience doing split testing, the crosstalk between tests is so rare as to be not an issue to worry about. The good news is that all your test assignments are independent. So the odds of, if someone's in A, you have an A-B test and a C-D over here, the odds of someone being A and C is the same as them being an A and D. So whatever crosstalk effects tend to average out across the 3 tests. That make sense?
But if you're looking at the same metrics, how do you know which one had to, like let's say one change was really good, one change was really bad on the number of downloads, those are still confounding in some way. So how can,
No, because in this case, imagine that we have 2 different download pages running, one that has a giant download button and the other has a fancy, beautiful download graphic. So the one with the button is going to be the clear winner because customers don't understand what to do with a fancy graphic, but they do know what to do with like a button. I've run that test a zillion times. So in that case, some customers saw the button, some customers didn't. And we're just going to look at the results for those customers in particular. Whether they also saw other stuff, like may have a confounding effect, but it's going to be averaged out across the 2 groups, as long as the sample size is high enough. But in my experience, certainly if you're in a consumer internet company, this is no problem at all. If you have a company that has a very small number of customers, the math is just a little bit different, and so spec is different, but the kind of underlying principle is the same. Does that make sense? I kind of ran through that quickly, but I promise more detail is available online. All right, one last thing, and then we'll break for some Q&A and hopefully get a little air in. I'm just going to put this thing called 5 Whys. This is a technique that has its origins in lean manufacturing. And the idea here is that behind every supposed technical problem is actually a human problem. And our goal when we do a post-mortem analysis is to find out what it was. So let me just run you through an example. A server goes down. We ask the question, why did it go down? Because the CPU usage spiked to 100% and the hard drive started thrashing. Okay, why? Because we shipped this new piece of code to that server 3 minutes before. Okay, well, how come our automated defense mechanisms in the cluster immune system didn't catch that change and revert it? Oh, that's because it uses some obscure API that we never bothered to write a test for. So that's like, from a post-mortem analysis, that's usually as far as we go. All technical issues, right? Obscure API, not enough defense mechanisms, server down. Let's fix that. But I want to ask a different question. Why did the person who wrote the code use an obscure API that took the site down? Oh, they didn't know that if they use this API and they don't, set the right flag in, page 92 of some set of configuration variables, that it'll have this effect. Okay, well, why didn't they know that? Oh, they're a new engineer, and they were never properly trained in the use of our system. Well, that's interesting. Why were they never trained? Oh, because their manager doesn't believe in training. Okay, that's interesting. We started with a technical problem, server down, and we ended with a managerial problem, manager doesn't believe in training. So that's 5 whys. It's just a way of determining what's the real root cause of a problem. And my humble contribution to the field is to suggest to you that every time you do this analysis, you make a proportional investment in preventing each of those 5 problems. So obviously we'll take the server back up by reverting that code. We'll improve our defense mechanisms so that they catch this kind of problem in the future. We'll also train this individual to make sure they know that they did something wrong and they know not to do it in the future. But of course, the most important change we have to make is talk to their manager about getting new employees to be properly trained. And the idea of the proportional investment is critical. Because when you go talk to that manager, here's the conversation I anticipate. Why didn't you train this guy? Oh, we don't have any kind of training program in this company, okay? So it's not my fault. Okay, interesting, but why don't you invest in preventing this problem in the future by creating a training program? All right, fine. That's going to take 6 weeks. So if you want, I can spend the next 6 weeks working on the training program, and you find somebody else to work on all the other stuff I was supposed to do during that time. And you're like, oh, crap, we don't have enough managers. Oh, no, of course we won't do that. That's the conversation that we have to figure out a way to break out of that deadlock. So my suggestion is, if it was a relatively minor problem, we'll make a minor investment at each of these 5 levels. And if it was a major problem, we'll make a major investment. Let's imagine in the case I just gave you, it's a minor problem. We decide, you know what? We're going to do 1 hour of fixing on each 5 of the 5 levels. So we go to that manager and we say, all right, we need to prevent this problem by training employees in the future. And he says, it's going to take 6 weeks to do that. That's cool. Just do the first hour. Well, I can't do anything in an hour. That's not true. Just whatever you're going to do the first hour of work on this solution. So, for example, if I remember having that exact conversation with somebody at Impu, it turned out that the thing we could do in an hour was go onto our internal wiki and add a page called curriculum for new engineers, and it had on it 5 bullet points of things you should learn. It was a pretty crappy first thing to do for a training program. But the next time we had a problem in the cluster that was traced back to a person not being properly trained, we did the next hour of work on it, and the next hour, and the next hour, and the next hour. Again, that speed regulator effect started to happen. That the more problems we had with a certain issue, the more time we spent preventing it. The more time we spent preventing it, the more time we save by not having to deal with that problem. Right now, if you're in a company, my prediction is that there's an 80-20 rule going on. 80% of the crap firefighting waste that you deal with is caused by 20% of your process and system. The problem is you don't know which 20% it is. And in fact, it's very hard to find the waste through top-down analysis. The great thing about 5 whys is it's kind of a bottoms-up way to direct your attention automatically to those areas that need the most attention. And therefore, when you start doing it, it can dramatically free up new resources that you didn't realize that you had, because you find out that you have this kind of hidden waste lurking in your development systems. And lest you think this is only for product development and coders, this is true company-wide. So my suggestion, that probably most of you will not take, because it's too difficult, too radical to actually try, but if you do try it, I promise results, is to do 5 whys whenever something unexpected happens. So if you did a marketing campaign and you thought it was going to generate $100 in revenue, but it generated $52 in revenue, do 5 whys. And if you said we're going to do a new refactoring of our code in IT, and we're going to change our operations infrastructure, and that will improve performance for customers by 30% and improve performance for customers by 3%, do 5 whys. You never know where 5 whys is going to take you. So make sure you have top management bought into this concept. Because often what you'll discover is supposedly technical problems have human problems, which is code for executive problems, which is code for CEOs telling people to do dumb stuff. So just be prepared for that to be one of the issues you confront, especially if you're the CEO. This can be a little bit painful. I know I've been the root cause of many problems over the years. But wouldn't you rather know than not know? I think so. So any questions about 5 whys? Yeah.
I'm kind of curious on the soft side of things here, in terms of the employees that you have, and as you've grown the team.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a great concept, and I know it's developed over time. But have you had a lot of, internal resistance to some of this? Because I've had some of these conversations you've had with some engineers that are like, okay, fine, I could do this, but, there goes the timeline. So I'm sort of curious in terms of, you've got
people with like growth mindsets, with fixed mindsets?
Yeah.
Did you hire, as you grew the team, did you kind of hire looking to find people that would embrace this, or was this structured in such a way that you were able to get your existing team to kind of buy into this and be kind of all on the same?
Let me answer your question in two different ways. The first is I personally always hire for good lateral thinking. Like I prefer generalists to specialists, and I prefer people who can think on their feet and are kind of open to new ideas versus supposedly experts who are super deep in some important but very rigid topic. So that certainly helps. But I have now seen this kind of thing work in all kinds of teams, including some very traditional, straight-laced, like very departmentally organized teams. Because, and my recommendation would be start small. So don't do 5 whys on stuff like, we missed our major product milestone for the last 6 months. Or our company's going down the toilet and about to fail. Okay? You can do that, but that's going to like raise the stakes and get everyone super freaked out. Like one of the first times we did formal 5 whys at Inview, we did it whenever a unit test would fail on the continuous integration server, which would be like, would turn up the most minor seeming crap, like, oh, somebody didn't know that this test needs to be run when you make this change. But actually, that we would start to dig into that and be like, oh, actually nobody knows what test to run ever, and so we're wasting tons of time like having the continuous integration server find problems that we could have found earlier. Well, why is that? Oh, turns out that we have this like very opaque code structure. You know, you never know where these things are going to go, and the cool thing about 5 whys is it pays off immediately. You're taking the first hour of prevention you do with 5 whys is very likely to be on whatever your most important issue is. So it pays dividends really quickly. So you can kind of start small and build trust and build momentum towards a more sweeping change. That's how we did it in Inview. In fact, we went years without having a formalized version of this. And if I can't get you to try full-blown 5 whys, you can try the light version, which is simply to say, we're willing to have any problem in the universe one time, but we're going to have a zero tolerance policy towards having the same problem twice. So anytime somebody screws up, no matter how badly they screwed up, like they took the whole site down and we made no money and our customers are mad and they kind of did everything wrong, we're like, listen, that's okay as long as you do whatever it takes to make sure that never happens again. And so that can get you out of a blame orientation and into a root cause orientation. That can be enough to kind of get that flywheel going, build that momentum towards doing it on a company-wide basis. Helpful? Yeah.
So it seems like a key part of this is proportional investment. And how do you work past the, especially, I mean, as an engineer, it's like, well, what's the general way we could do this? And how can we create an open source project to solve this for all people? And
yeah.
How do you actually make sure that a proportional investment that actually yields a solution? Like, how do you enforce it? Is there like...
No, it's just a judgment thing. This is not, there's no formula. Like, if you start to get pushback that you're wasting too much time in prevention, like that's probably a sign that your projects are too big. And if you're not actually making the problem better, then they're probably too small. But like, for example, some of the common pushback I'll get is product managers who hear from engineers, your thing could have been ready today, but I had to spend an extra day doing unit tests. So sorry. It's like, come on, you spent 4 weeks on that thing, and the reason it was late because of the 1 extra day of unit tests? Like, no, it wasn't. It's just that's the thing that product managers don't understand the most, so you're going to blame the problem on that, so that the product manager will leave you alone and not think it's your fault, but think it's somebody else's fault, right? I've been an engineer. I've used that argument many times to pass the blame to somebody else. What's interesting about that is if you take that kind of argument seriously, you'll discover a really interesting thing. You go to the product manager and say, listen, which of the two would you rather have? I can have an engineer tell you a feature is done, and what that means actually is that it is temporarily done until some unknowable time in the future when it will magically stop working. Probably in the middle of the night when you'll probably get a call about it. Or, when he says done, I can have it mean it's done and it will always work as specified. Every product manager I've ever worked with will be like, no, I don't want that indefinite might blow up in my face thing. And they're like, okay, when someone says done, you need to ask them if they're unit tests, because if there's not, like, they've actually they sold you a bill of goods. They said done when they really meant was temporarily done until an unknown time in the future. So those kind of conversations only happen if you can actually uncover those conflicts and get them out into the open and get everybody in the room to discuss. That's what 5 whys is really good at. So you'll have that argument like within the first 3 5 whys almost always. And that's perfect. If you have all the people in the room, you can be the one then to facilitate. Listen, engineer, I know you're mad at the product manager. You guys are going like this about who's to blame. Everyone calm down. Here's why we make these preventative steps. Here's what they're for, blah, blah, blah. And in fact, we actually would write up the reports for 5 Whys, and we would email them out to the whole company, even for really technical stuff, so that everyone in the company got a sense for what we were doing. Because like most marketing people, all they know is our site goes down all the time, and our engineers don't care. So it's like, it's my burden to bear with customers. I'm always apologizing, and these jerks don't care at all that our product is of low quality. And the engineering team's always like, these jerk marketers are always asking us to do the impossible, and they don't appreciate the 24/7 efforts we put into preventing the problems that they complain about, right? Because we're in departmental silos and we don't talk to each other. 5 Whys can break that wall down and make everybody realize what it is that we're actually doing in prevention, and then marketing can actually have a constructive role into saying, you know what, I'd be willing to give up some of my programming budget for more prevention, because I see that you guys are making an effort, but it's not good enough yet. We need more. Make sense? Yeah.
I really like the 5 Whys whole concept. I'm curious if you've applied it to other non-technical things like relationships, for example.
Oh, in my personal life?
Yeah.
I decline to comment on that particular question. I will say that it's extremely useful in a lot of contexts. And so I would recommend that you try it where you see appropriate. This is not legal or romantic advice or disclaimer. You know, asterisk, not a guarantee. Whatever I can do to help out.
What's
your real question?
Actually. What happens if you're in a startup where, for example, the customer base is like doctors? You know, not like millions of people out there on the internet where you need to have like 20 iterations every day and like all this kind of stuff. How would you modify these techniques? Or would that be an example of a case where maybe the problem is more known and so you can do more agile development instead of this?
This doesn't, the number of customers you have is actually doesn't matter at all. In fact, most of the techniques I'm suggesting can be ported straight. Like even continuous deployment. Because the vast majority of the changes we make as development organizations are not end user visible. They're just little like refactorings of the underlying API. I really should have put not end user visible in quotation marks. But of course they're supposedly not end user visible, right? They're supposed to be no change. They're just idempotent refactoring. But in fact, that's where a lot of our waste comes from, is when we make stupid refactorings that we think don't have any side effects but do. In those cases, continuous deployment can drive a lot of waste out of our system right away without customers being any the wiser. I will say that on the data collection stuff, the function is actually how much information you get from customers, which is a function of number of data points times the amount of depth you get per data point. And when you have a smaller number of customers, that's actually awesome, because you can get to know them much better. And that's true, it's kind of a spectrum where you want to find where you are on that spectrum and then adapt your processes accordingly. If you have specific questions about techniques, we can take it offline. Yeah.
So I mean, you can make money by charging people directly, indirectly, or by charging a third party.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it seems like a lot of people try to pay down charging people directly. What do you do in situations where, let's say it's consumer web, and there's not a willingness to pay, but there's value being created?
There are situations where that validated learning about customers, the validation should not be revenue. The reason I don't go into too detail about it is it's so easy to convince yourself that you're in a special case where you really shouldn't worry about revenue because you've done something at the whiteboard. So I urge everybody to double check that assumption before you go forward, because I would say probably 80% of the startups I meet with think they're in that case. I would think less than 1% actually are. So I think there's a huge discrepancy there. That said, all that matters is that you develop some mechanism for getting real about whether you're making progress or not. So it's easy to convince yourself that you're learning something, but where's the evidence? Like, there's got to be some evidence that's outside of your building that says, here are the facts that we marshal in defense of our value proposition. Does that make sense? That's really what it's about. Yeah.
Did you guys patent some of this stuff, or is the implementation and your learning with the customers it's stable enough so that it works as a barrier of entry for other competitors?
Hold that thought for a second. I just wanted to put this slide up. This is the same information that's on the chart. That there's a lot more than that we can talk about today. A lot of these techniques are used at Imbue and are the reason why Imbue is beating some of its better-known competitors handily, including a not-to-be-named larger company that said, we would like to buy you, and if you say no, we're going to compete with you and kill you. We then poached one of our co-founders to run the project that they were going to compete with us against. But of course, they thought they knew the spec for the product as it existed at that time. So when they spent 2 years building it and then launched it with much fanfare, they were building a product that was competing with where our learning was, a year and a half ago. So by the time they brought it to market, that was actually obsolete. That's the competitive advantage that startups have, that they can go through this feedback loop faster than their competitors. That's what this is all about. So you can't patent that. But I'm not worried about patenting. In fact, if there's any InView competitors in the room, I welcome you to have all this information because I give this information out for free to tons of people, very few of whom actually do anything with it. Because, of course, it's very easy to think about doing things. The real question is, how do you make it actionable? How do you actually take it back to your company and say, we need to change our behavior in order to get better results? And the truth is that most of you today are not going to do that. And I understand. I'm in this for the long term. My goal is for us as an industry to improve the way that we work and stop squandering human potential. And I'm confident that if you don't start doing it in this startup, you'll do it in the next or the next, maybe even the one after that. I don't know how many startups it will take, but I'm confident eventually these ideas will start to get some traction. So I'm in it for the long term. That's what I'm here for, yeah.
Going back to the tale of two startups, and one of the lines that you have on the code faster, just-in-time scalability.
Yeah.
Startup number one had this goal of 100 million, or whatever it was, users by X date.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about how you did InView better and managed to grow up to a larger user base without what you were saying of
the big
taking
bang
all the
architecture,
downtime
yeah.
to architecture, all that sort of stuff?
I didn't bring my slides for that with me, so I can't demonstrate. So you'll have to look on the blog if you're interested in the details. What I will say is that because we were doing the stuff that I've been talking about, we were able to change the underlying architecture of our software in real time in response to changes in customer demand in time to be able to scale. So we went from, like I said, that one single box, shared server, like single point of failure, single point of everything, all the way to a fully sharded, decentralized, redundant infrastructure without having to stop and re-architect. So literally, we had a pattern where we would come in on Monday. InView's peak usage is on the weekends when the kids are not in school. So we would come in on Monday and be like, oh, here are the systems that we're about to fall down over the weekend. And we'd make a plan for, all right, what do we need to do before the next weekend to partition that data better, to change the infrastructure so that we could support it. And then we would make those changes like between Monday and Wednesday, deploy them on Thursday, double check that they're working on Friday, and then go home for the weekend. Come back in the next Monday and repeat. We did that even during a period where InView was practically doubling every month and going through its crazy hockey stick shaped growth. It allowed us to kind of allocate resources to scalability as needed. So sometimes we would do one project like that a week. Sometimes we'd have to do 3 or 4. But we weren't worried about it because we had the ability to deploy even crazy architectural changes with all this support that if we were screwing something up, we'd find out about it right away. It took us a long time to develop that capability, but even today, if InView were to experience a sudden doubling of traffic because like it was on Oprah or something, I'm very confident, even if the architecture that they had had some kind of single point of failure in it still, or some scaling point that you just can't anticipate until you double again, that they would find it and be able to respond to it extremely quickly. Yeah?
So maybe take a break and let people who need to go.
Yes, I'd be happy to do
the conversation. Some of us I know need to do other meetings also in a little bit. I'm not sure when you're scheduled to wrap up or not.
Okay, I did not know that. So let me do one last thing while I have everybody in the room, and then we will break, and we take a break. And if people want to stay and ask questions, I'm happy to do it. This is just an exercise I always try to do at the end of my conversations. Take just a minute. If you're willing to indulge me, everybody, if you would just close your eyes, willing to do it, just take a moment, and I just want you to think about one thing that you could do that you've been thought of in the last hour and a half that you could make your company better tomorrow, in the next 24 hours. So if it's something that would take 3 weeks to do, that's too big. Something that you could actually do, and just visualize yourself having done it 24 hours from now. It could be something that I suggested today, or it could be something you were prompted to think of because what I was saying sounds like completely terrible, whatever. Just think of one thing that you could do. Hold it in your mind, think about it. And that's it. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate those who indulge me. Just for more resources, my blog is Startup Lessons Learned. I'm on Twitter. You can email me. I'm very easy to get in touch with. Do a series of workshops with O'Reilly if anyone's interested. The information is online. And I thank you all very, very much. I'll be around if you want to ask questions.